Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and I am here with my illustrious co-host, Matt Scott.
Hello.
Your last days as a single man.
My last actual bit of work as a single person. I've made it quite clear I am shutting off for the next 3 weeks. I'm focusing on Laura.
Yes, which is awesome.
Yeah. It's been fun. We've started this business together, and we need time away from it to grow it and grow our relationship. So
after this podcast, you're done until you step back off the plane from Africa.
I am not working until the 13th.
Oh, that's amazing.
Very clear. I am incredibly excited.
Well, not only am I grateful that you're here, obviously the listeners are going to be thankful that you're here as well, because we have a very fun,
awesome podcast
to discuss today, which is the 2021 Ford Bronco.
And now for a quick break from one of our supporters. Let's take a minute to recognize one of the godfathers of overlanding and onboard power and off-grid towing. The folks at Red Arc build the toughest, most versatile power management electronics known to man. And right now, Red Arc is sponsoring a $20,000 vehicle upgrade and expense-paid adventure. It's the Red Arc Power Your Wild sweepstakes, and it's easy to enter. Visit redarcelectronics.com/poweryourwild. Sign up and power your odds by visiting Red Arc's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube pages. Outback tested, Outback tough. So get to it and power your wild with Red Arc.
Which is
beautiful looking.
Yeah. I mean,
one of the best exterior designs.
Yeah.
I think that we will see in that modern internal combustion era I continually refer to.
We've had a lot of test vehicles, and I have never once had one that caused quite the pandemonium.
I have never had somebody in my family ask for a ride in a press car before.
Yeah.
Wait. Yeah, pretty much. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Like little fanfare around it, you know.
Big time. I mean, you try to go to the grocery store and you get out and there's people taking pictures and crawling around.
I would love to say that women are flocking towards me for driving a Ford Bronco. Mainly it's men in cargo shorts. They'll have various patches affixed to them, to their bodies.
Yeah, that's right.
Male genitalia attracting magnet is the way I would maybe describe the Ford Bronco. I get a lot of thumbs up from dudes.
Yeah. But it seems like it's also going to be very popular with everyone.
Oh, 100%.
Just like a Wrangler is. I think it's going to be really popular.
It's got a cute face, right?
It does.
It kind of transcends gender.
Totally. I mean, it's a classic looking.
Yeah.
It's the modern classic, right?
It's really good looking. I mean, there's little things that you can kind of nitpick on it, but overall, if you have exactly 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it's a pretty good car. It's got some problems. The end.
Podcast is over.
But
it is totally different, right?
Yeah.
Which I think the Wrangler desperately needed competition. Like, this is where I'll give Jeep a lot of credit, is that they never stopped taking it very serious. There's other vehicles in our segment. Like, for example, the 4Runner is a good example of that.
Yeah.
It is a great vehicle, but because they don't have competitive pressure, it is one of the best choices in the segment. They don't need
but Toyotas are currently great because they don't break.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, I mean, a 4Runner is great off road, and it's this kind of classic interpretation. It's this swan song of like the 150 platform Land Cruiser. And
I love 5-speed transmissions and really outdated engines that get horrible gas mileage.
Yeah.
But they're simple and they run.
They do. But I like it when our industry has more competitive pressure, like we're seeing in the mid-sized truck segment.
You already saw Jeep in comparison or in retaliation or response to the Sasquatch package. You can now get 456 gears.
Yep.
I want to say they're calling it a 1.5 inch lift and 35-inch tires on a Wrangler.
What is it? The Recon? Is that what
Extreme Recon package?
Extreme Recon. Yeah. And that's cool. Good. But right. So that I think that anytime we see this kind of competitive pressure, we're also going to most likely see some response from Land Rover with the Defender. We're going to see them coming out with packages for the Defender that are going to be more off-road capable.
Yeah.
Because I would say that even more so than the Wrangler, that the Bronco is a price shopping or a competitive shopping decision for a Defender. So, which isn't that's not a coincidence because
it's somewhere in that spectrum.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that the Defender does so well is that at the lower end of its price range, it still feels like a quality Land Rover product. True. You're maybe not getting Windsor leather as you would in the X, but on the SE, I believe it is. That's the lowest one.
It could be whatever the base model.
Whatever the base model is,
great on the inside.
You get like some interesting fabrics.
Yep.
They do that really cool green,
love it.
Textile to it. You're still kind of getting a lot of the same functionality and quality that you are,
and you still get the airbag suspension system, which is super comfortable. I like the fact that Wrangler now has this pressure in the space, and Jeep has responded. If you look at in the last year, they have revised their payload capacities. So we've always been a little bit critical of the Wrangler for having basically 1,000-pound payload. And now if you spec out a Rubicon and you look at the specs, 1,300-pound payload.
Yeah.
So that's a big improvement. It gives you a lot more latitude. But then when we look at the Bronco's got 1,000-pound payload. So it matches the old Wrangler. So Jeep is definitely staying ahead of the game with the Recon package and everything else. And it is certainly, I believe, common and important to compare the Bronco against the Wrangler. And we'll do that at the end of the podcast. But you drove it.
I drove it.
Yeah, we had a press car for a couple weeks. We kind of had
it on and off. Yep. You drove it more in technical off-road.
Yep.
I daily drove it for a bit. I did some dirt road stuff. Yeah, it's cool. I think that if I could, in a couple of sentences, describe the Bronco, it falls victim to that expectation reality thing. The exterior design is great. The interior design is great. I think the execution on the materials that they've chosen in the vehicle, like the steering wheel looks like it came from a Ford Fiesta. The switchgear looks like it came from a Ford Fiesta. I kind of feel bad, but in one of my little Instagram things, I kind of like scratched the dash, and I don't like have monster fingernails or anything. It actually scratched it. Like the materials that they have chosen are just really cheap. That's not to be mistaken with being utilitarian. There's a difference between being utilitarian and being cheap because we have the hottest new product and we can get away with it. And that's kind of what certain aspects of the vehicle, made me think. I've owned a lot of Fords. Please don't mistake me for being like a Ford hater. I had a brand new 2016 Super Duty King Ranch. I had a 2018 Raptor that was brand new. I've got an Earth Roamer that's on a F550. I'm not anti-Ford. For example, you could get a 3.5 EcoBoost King Ranch F-150 for the same sticker that this Bronco is. And I can't help but think that because there is more competition in that segment, Ford was willing to spend more money. I think it was an economic decision. Like you had some great designers. I know that they worked with a lot of fantastic folks in the off-road industry, particularly in the Baja side of things. They gave them a lot of great feedback. And then like a bean counter in, Detroit was like, no, we have to use the cheapest materials possible because we've got a cash cow in our hands.
Right.
Just my opinion. Like when you open the door, like it feels like the door flexes and like the window vibrates and rattles and then the door panel moves. That concerns me because like every Ford I've owned rattles after some off-road use.
Right.
Wrangler doesn't. 4Runner doesn't. I mean, Defender probably does.
At first, sorry. At first, I thought, well, maybe they need to make the doors really lightweight because you can remove them.
Yeah.
But I think you make a valid point. I think that they did do what they could to make them lightweight. It's 45 pounds for the rear door, 55 pounds for the front door so that someone can lift them. You showed me like the example of that door handle, like the component of the door.
The door handle's 3 different components. And like, if you kind of like grab it from a weird angle, you can like get your finger kind of caught in it and it'll like pinch you. It's just like 3 pieces of cheap molded plastic assembled together. But then here's the thing that frustrates me is like the F-150 which is realistically runs almost the same price range as this vehicle, has like these wonderful rubber solid door handles. So that's maybe what frustrates me is they know how to do interiors. They have cars, they have trucks that go off-road that have massaging seats.
Sure.
And again, it's not a matter of, oh, well, I don't care about interior, I'm taking it off-road, as some people, have said to me. It's like, dude, it's not that. It's that the materials just are cheap. If you put a dog in that car, I did not feel right bringing our Greyhound in that, because I thought it would scratch the crap out of the interior.
Well, you make a good point. We when we took it out with the video crew, which you guys will all listening will be able to see our evaluation of the vehicle on YouTube about the time that this drops. When we just had a bag, like a duffel bag in the back.
Yeah.
And it did wear on the surface of the back of the center console after just a few hours of use. There's definitely experiences that I have that have validated what you're saying. And it's too bad because like when I look at the interior, it's exactly what I would want it to look like.
It's great.
And like even the seat material feels like it's something that's going to be easy to clean, but it doesn't have that cheap vinyl feel to it.
Have you tried wearing shorts in Arizona with whatever that material is made?
I have not seen the use case.
I will tell you that my rosé colored skin sticks to it in a painful manner. It's like something that they would use for like incontinent hospital patients.
Oh no.
Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like it's not that it was it's like somebody from Detroit that's never actually been off road has gone and said, oh, well, this is great and it's real cheap and we could get a great deal on it and get this much cents back to our shareholders. But like they could have gone for like a nice cloth that was probably the same price.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I liked the look of it and it felt like it was a little more durable than like the Dash, for example. Yeah. But no, I didn't do the shorts because I most of the time don't wear shorts. Pretty rarely.
I will tell you, Laura sat in it once and was like, nope.
Yeah.
Does not breathe.
Well, that's a good point.
But I'm saying these things because I want the vehicle to be good. Like the seat design, very comfortable, very nice. I like how it looks. Right. I like how the interior looks. I like the functionality of the interior. I like how everything is designed. They've clearly consulted with a lot of, four-wheel drive experts and professionals and asking what they wanted. And then an accountant got involved.
Yeah. And we know how that always goes, right?
But the driveline is fantastic. I mean, the driveline is class leading.
Yeah, I really like that 2.7.
I love that 10-speed. I had that 10-speed in the Raptor. Flawless transmission. You can barely feel it shift.
Right.
It is tuned to get to that peak, torque output. This particular engine was the 2.7 liter EcoBoost. So that's, and I don't have this memorized, 330 horsepower on presumably premium fuel and 415 pound-feet of torque. If you use regular fuel, it is 315 and 410.
That's amazing, right?
I love the fact that Ford does this, though, that if the ECU is self-learning, that if you are in Baja or wherever you are, like I've been down in Baja with the Raptor and you're in Bahia de Los Angeles and you get
85. Yeah.
It's like, do you want some gas or do you not want it?
Yeah.
The fact that it's not specifically just tuned for that.
Just really, get the Magna, cool. Like 85 Magna.
Yeah. There's no, what do they call it? Prema.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, so the transmission and the driveline combination, fantastic, class leading. Maybe not as like fast as I would have thought it was for a premium engine option, but Ford kind of does that. Is they're like, oh, you want your V8? Cool. Yeah. You want your hybrid? Cool. You want this or this or this? They give a lot of options. It keeps it in the power band and it goes. It's got a real beefy mid range.
And the transmission is also self-learning. And I found that anytime I like to try to drive a vehicle in manual mode so that I can have some driver intervention. But I actually found that I didn't like
with that many gears, you're slower than the transmission.
Yeah. You have to preemptively shift because it's fairly slow to shift in manual mode. I just found myself leaving it in.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there are twice as many gears as a 4Runner.
Yeah.
There are, I know that it has more gears than the Wrangler, which has the ZF 8 HP. I'm not going to say that it's a better transmission than the 8 HP. I mean, that 8 HP is used in everything from a Jeep Wrangler, to a Rolls-Royce Ghost, to an Aston Martin, DB11. it is a great transmission. But for most people, this is pretty good. And I'm curious, as we've talked about this idea of competition, what that will make Jeep do.
Yeah. And I wonder if the 10-speed is just so well suited to a turbocharged engine. I mean, it seems like if you can keep it in the turbo boost by shifting more often, then you're just getting a lot better overall performance out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was great. I thought that the chassis was fantastic. It has a really quite unique rear suspension architecture with kind of a trailing arm, quite a beefy trailing arm, which is why it's so good high speed in dirt. And then it actually has kind of it has a coilover.
It does.
So for the aftermarket, it's what people are going to be able to do on the aftermarket. Like I was talking to a good buddy of mine, I guess, who will have to remain nameless in this. And one of his friends is working on the Ford race team thing. And the performance they're getting out of this thing is, beating their Bronco R.
Wow.
Whether or not that's marketing speak, I can't verify, but I can see it. To be able to lift the rear without really having to worry about as many different angles and control arms and track bars and all that kind of stuff.
And the angle that those coilovers are at definitely is going to allow for quite a bit of lift.
Yeah.
The front I thought was tuned just about perfect for my needs. And that's where you see the real benefit over the Wrangler is the independent front suspension. I know heresy, but
IFS for most situations is better than a solid axle. I mean, as we were talking before this, does the Wrangler probably have more absolute capability than the Bronco? Yes. Is the Wrangler going to be maybe easier to modify and have less of a ceiling than an IFS system? Yes. But we're talking about a car that has front and rear lockers, 35-inch tires that's factory designed around that for IFS. So you're not talking about wonky control arm angles on a 4Runner to fit 33s. You're talking about proper OE level suspension angles and handling on 35s. And it doesn't feel like it's on 35s.
No, it drives great. And I think that they got away with the 35s because they built it into the way that they designed the body.
Yeah, it was designed around it.
Exactly. So they can take a huge tire in those wheel wells. The rear suspension for me, so higher speed dirt travel, probably driving it at 65 to 70% of what I would drive like at race speeds. And for this kind of class vehicle, it was really excellent. There's a couple things that you have to manage. If you go into Baja mode, that helps a lot. It's very well tuned for that. The rear suspension, I'd love to see a little bit more compression travel. And I think that's going to be easily addressed with the aftermarket. And then it's fairly firm on compression. So with no weight in there.
It's pretty highly sprung. I think that translates into why you're not seeing much body roll.
Right.
But I think the faster you're going, and if you're getting into any kind of whoops or stuff where you're going to be, using the length of the travel, I can see why they did that, but I feel
it works great in that regard.
I feel like if you did a 5 to 8% softer rate, it would fix all the problems that
I think so. That's my feeling.
Spring rate.
I'd like to see slightly softer spring rate, no change in compression damping. I like the rebound that it's got, lots of control, very little porpoising. And then if I could see even 15 millimeters of more height in the rear, more spring length in the rear, that would really help. But I mean, I was driving it fast through this wash and, where we had posted sentries and everything else like that. And these are big events and this truck just soaked it up.
It's really good.
And then when when the car starts to rotate on you and that turbo comes on, then things get really lively. But they actually did a great job of tuning it, the vehicle stability control enough that it kind of knows when it's going to come onto the pipe like that. It does a pretty good job of not letting you overstep. Well,
there's also, there's going to be the Warthog or whatever they're calling it. That's the Raptor version. There's already been some spy photos that have kind of leaked out or people have seen it in the wild. What Ford is presenting on this chassis, I do not feel is the capability of the chassis. And that's what's really exciting to me.
It's got so much more. I mean, this is a stock vehicle and it is so good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing for everybody that's listening to take away is, unless it's super important that you've got 40-inch tires on your Wrangler, I mean, for a travel vehicle, it is incredibly capable out of the box. Yeah. I don't know that I would change even the tires are great. I don't know that I would change anything out of this vehicle other than, again, maybe like a 15 millimeter longer spring in the back.
There's one thing I would change. It would be a top that didn't give me a headache at 45 mile an hour from whistling, but so they're recalling all of them. And I think that they're doing recalls on vehicles that haven't even been delivered. Right. They've had to push things back. And I think that even goes to say that maybe they're realizing they pushed the cheap envelope a little bit too much.
But we got a great chassis. Isn't Webasto making the top?
Yeah, but of course you're going to throw the supplier under the bus.
Yeah, maybe.
That supplier just made that to the design, and they were handed a CAD file.
Yeah.
By Ford Design or Ford Engineering or whatever it is. I could hear the argument of quality control issues. If you looked at ours, there's one side that kind of sat about a half an inch over.
Totally. And there's big waves in it where it's mounted.
But sitting down with an aerospace engineer that I cannot hope to remember. He's like, oh, well, yeah, it's making this noise because of this and this and this and this and this because of how it's designed. This is the guy that designed the Apache helicopter. Right. I'm going to say he knows what he's talking about a little bit, so maybe that's where it bit him.
Yeah.
And to call myself out, which I think it is important to say, I know that I'm complaining about the interior, and I'm complaining about kind of fit and finish of certain things. This one is a very early production vehicle. Mm-hmm. That being said, there have been Broncos that have been delivered already to customers. So I don't know how valid that is, but we did get an amazing chassis. So, maybe Ford put the money into different things. If somebody was going to say to me, hey, let's get a totally baller chassis that has all this capability, but to do that, we're going to have a Ford Fiesta. We're going to have a $14,000 car interior on a $58,000 test vehicle. I'd consider it.
Yeah. And that may be the result. Like we were talking about before we hit the record button, I think that I'm in this particular case with this vehicle, I'm actually having a little bit of difficulty overcoming my positive bias towards it.
Yeah.
So I'm viewing the vehicle.
Don't worry. All of Instagram's in the same boat.
Yeah. I'm viewing the vehicle with these rose colored glasses because the functional performance of it, the actual functionality of it on the trail, on the dirt, as a travel vehicle.
No complaints.
I've been so impressed by it. And it looks so charming that it's like literally it's won me over because
it looks great.
It's so charming, but it's real. That's why it's so great that you and I have the chance to kind of riff on these things because you may be in the same boat with a different vehicle. And I'm like, well, what about, and it's really important because after you shared all that with me, I sat down in the car this morning before they went and picked it up. And I'm like, yeah, look at that. I mean, the dash, you could definitely tell it needs to have less of a scratchable surface on the dash, and it needs to have maybe a harder finish. And then there's lots of little touch points that are beyond this functionality that I find so useful that you're right are definitely.
Yeah. And I was at Monterey Car Week and chatting with a few other journos that have had access to the vehicle, and it's kind of seems to be a similar thing. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves how it looks. Damn, that interior is cheap.
Yeah,
But hey, this is a new vehicle. This is the second greatest Bronco they've ever made. There's the first one that was amazing, and then they messed up every successive one. And then this one's number 2. And but this one has potential to be. No, it doesn't have potential to be number 1. You can't overtake the heritage of
that's difficult, but in so many ways.
I mean, it is a better vehicle.
It is just like we talk about an LJ and a JK compared to any previous Wrangler. Yeah. It's so much better. It doesn't mean that a long wheelbase TJ isn't awesome, because it is awesome. It's just the new ones are really good.
Yeah. I was talking to my soon-to-be father-in-law, Ron, and he compared the interior to his 2007 JK.
Yeah.
It was about kind of that quality of finish. But to his point, he said it was a Sahara and he paid $22,000 for it at the time.
Right.
So it's like you kind of hook, line and sinker people on the internet and you're like, oh my God, I have to have it. And they're going to look by it.
And I wonder if it really even matters. Aren't they sold out for?
Yeah, they're sold out
2 years of the vehicle. It seems
so
like,
why not make?
They just. I guess
that's where I go back to the accounting decision.
Right.
It's not something that I think the designers did, and I've chatted with other designers, at Car Week. And just friends of mine during this, it's like, yeah, it looks great, but not the finest hour of execution was kind of the thing. I think one of the interesting things is the hype of this vehicle on the internet.
Yeah.
No one has had a measured response to it.
Yeah.
Like if you're on the Insta sphere of things, everyone was all about it.
Yeah.
And I have a theory.
Okay. I chat with a lot of people. I know, and I'm not kidding, at least 10 people that were told, like people with a voice, that they were in contention for in the running to get a Bronco. Of course, they're going to say great things. They dangled the carrot in front of all these guys. Of those people, I don't know. I guess I know one that did. But he always was going to, because he was kind of media and had a legit audience. But like almost everybody I knew that was like relatively popular in a Jeep or a Tacoma or whatever. And all these people were posting about it left and right. They didn't shut up about the thing. It's the greatest. It's this. Oh my God. It's so much better than a Wrangler. It's so much this. And then you ask them, have you seen one? Have you driven one? Right.
Like, have you had access to anything that Ford hasn't produced? And not trying to toot the editorial horn, but that's the difference between an influencer, who gets paid for their audience,
right,
and editorial, who gets paid for their ethics.
That's right.
And now that you're starting to see journalists get these vehicles, I think, for me, you're starting to see consistent responses. I said, great truck, maybe not as good as some people have been saying.
Sure.
That's kind of an interesting tactic. That's a great way to.
They hedged during the time that it mattered most.
Yeah.
By getting the influencers all thinking about the possibility.
I could get this.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Right.
I could get out of my Tacoma. People will do anything to do that. So.
And that's why we love having this podcast, because we can say whatever we want.
Yeah.
Because thanks to you listeners, that's how we get paid, is because of our readers and listeners, not because of
exactly.
Because of some OEM that's paying us to say something.
Exactly. So let's talk about some of the great things. Love that there's a manual transmission. Love that there's a 7-speed manual transmission. Love that it's a Getrag. They make fantastic boxes. Coolest thing is that crawler gear.
That's
6.58.
Yeah, that's insane.
So it's a 7-speed, but it's really a 6-speed.
It's a 6-speed,
totally fine
with like your granddad's granny low. It's got like a granny low first gear in a 6-speed manual transmission.
Yeah. So
I hope that people buy them so that they don't stop putting them in the vehicle, because like if I was to get a Bronco, I would definitely want the manual.
Oh yeah. Hell no. I'd want the 10-speed.
I know, but I would want the manual just because it just...
Daddy likes to go fast.
I know. Yeah. And it's just again, that charm of...
50% of 911 buyers have opted for a manual transmission. And I think that that's cool. It's the highest take rate of a manual transmission in a modern vehicle, enthusiast vehicle.
That's really surprising.
In England, like the Vauxhall Astra or something probably is still manual,
but that's actually very interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Actually, specifically that's GT3.
Okay.
But
I wonder what the second highest vehicle would be in that same idea. We should do a podcast just on...
You know what? If I was to make a guess, Toyota GT86.
Okay. Could be.
That would be it. I think.
Could be. Yeah. Be the right buyer and everything.
Yeah. Actually, I guess it would be STI because it's not available in auto. The advanced 4x4 package gets you a 3.06 low range. When you have a 7-speed with that crawl gear, that's a 9.75 to 1 crawl ratio. That is until Jeep released this extreme recon package that was class leading.
Yep. 95 to 1.
Can you ever argue that it was class leading because you can now buy an extreme recon package and you can't actually get a Bronco? I don't know how you'd say that, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, totally.
It's funny. They were able to respond faster than get this into production. It's got a Dana 44 Advantech M220 rear axle or axle geeks. That's the same thing that's in a Gladiator or a JL, which is cool.
One thing that's important to talk about on those axles is the differential locks. So there's a couple things about this vehicle that I found in the trail that were really interesting. So the sway bar disconnect, I don't know what the technology is, but I think it's electromechanical.
Magic.
So, yeah, it's got fairy dust. It's like some kind of a electromagnetic sway bar disconnect. So it's not geared like a Rubicon is.
Yeah.
So you can be under full like compression tension. So it can be crossed up under full load, and you push the sway bar disconnect, and it immediately relaxes the suspension. And then
they also have that one option where it like it forces articulation.
It sure feels like it does that. So it maybe it's hydraulic, like a KDSS on Toyota. I don't know what the technology is.
It's magic.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel like magic, because you can be on the trail and just realize like, oh, I'm in a position where I need to have the sway bar disconnected, and you can push it at any point, and it doesn't need to get unbound in order to release. And then you can push it again, and the next time that the vehicle's level, it is back to connected. And it probably is something where it is a counter forcing it, because I found that head toss in this vehicle is half of what it is in a Wrangler.
Yeah.
So it's probably some kind of control or hydraulic control that allows.
I have like this permanent bruise about right here on a Wrangler, because I'm kind of like tall enough that I hit the
wham
sound bar all the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, a Wrangler has, again, more articulation, no question, but the Bronco's got a 620 ramp travel index and much less head toss. So I do like that. The lockers will also engage and disengage at any point. So they don't need, if you're under driveline tension
of an air locker, but in a arguably more reliable electronic format.
Yeah, exactly. That I really liked. Just for like giggle mode is the donut feature.
Yeah.
I don't know what they call it.
You had a lot better experience with it than I did.
Okay.
But
well, that's right, because you tried to do it on like DG.
Yeah, decomposed granite for people that aren't from Arizona. It's like crappy sand.
Right.
It's like sand,
very granular sand.
It's like sand that like you walk on, you're like, ow, ow, ow. See,
so it kind of worked.
It was a 50% reduction in turning radius from, because I kind of sat there like constant throttle, constant, full lock, did it without, did it with. And since it had recently rained, I could actually kind of see how it was working. It's really cool. It works better than the 200 series.
Yes. And I think that's because of tires. I think that the technology is probably similar, but the tires are so much better on the Bronco. But I had it down in a sand wash, and it would rotate the vehicle around.
That's awesome.
Within the length of the wheelbase. So the kind of cone of sand that it would create was maybe 2 feet in diameter. So that rear tire would swing around in a 2 foot circle.
So if you're incapable of doing a 3-point turn,
yes,
this is a wonderful feature for you. It's the new hill descent control for me.
I know it is.
I'm a curmudgeon.
I know it's so funny. It's so funny because there probably are practical applications for the use of this donut thing, but I found myself doing about 8,000 of them in this wash and giggling the entire time. I think the production crew is thoroughly exhausted and tired of being swung around in circles. But
Paula, were you tired of Scott?
Never. She says never. Yeah. Uh-huh. She's being too kind. It's a nice thing about having nice people that work with you.
Yeah. There's 8,000 different packages. So I'm just going to try and get this right here. Lots of specifications. So there's the base Big Bend Black Diamond Badlands in 7-speed, a base Big Bend Outer Banks Black Diamond Badlands Wild Track First Edition Sasquatch package equipped base Big Bend. There's a lot of different things, and I mean, give the people what they want,
which is nice.
And then there's packages, I believe, within the packages.
Yes. Like we had a Badlands Sasquatch, and I don't know what the difference is between those two.
I know it was a Sasquatch. It looked like that. It had like that cool, like that color that came out on like the 10th anniversary of Rubicon.
Area 51 is what
Area 51. Yeah.
It's super cool color. Great color. I like they're probably totally non-functional other than if you wanted limb risers, which are usually non-functional, but they had these brackets on the leading edge of the hood that I loved. From a practical perspective, those brackets line up perfectly with the center of the tire. So if you're wondering where your tire is going to end up, you can look and see those limb riser brackets or whatever people are going to probably use them to hang high lifts on the front of their vehicle, which is going to be ridiculous, but
high lifts that they don't know how to use, won't ever use.
Well, or you have to remove it every time to get into your hood. Right. Or it's like when you see them mounted to the front of Jeeps, it's like, then the people, they can't lift their hood up because it's too heavy. And
like I have a high lift. I will never argue against the utility of one.
Totally useful. So many different options. The one thing that's really interesting, and I don't know if it's that it's kind of the start of the go fast options, is this Wild Track. And that is 3 inches wider than the Badlands and 4 inches wider than the base vehicle. So
are you sure we didn't have that one?
Maybe
because it already had like the big, if I was to make any critique on the styling, I understand functionally why they did it, but the fenders do look tacked on. Like to me, this particular Bronco was trying to echo the first generation Bronco, which was in its original form relatively dainty, like an uncut Bronco is to me perfection for that vehicle. And what I mean by that is they had for visitors that are, or viewers, listeners, the people that are actually paying attention at this point, 39 minutes and 48 seconds in, they had that kind of, the tire was a little bit covered on the rear.
It was.
Difference to me between a Bronco and a Wrangler was always that one was a full body vehicle and one was a narrow body vehicle with fenders. We've kind of ended up with something maybe in the middle. And I think since they are using the body from that first generation Bronco clearly as the inspiration because of the Bronco grille and the headlights and whatever, they look tacked on maybe. I get why they did it. Otherwise you'd end up with something like real wide. And this is going to be better off road. That would maybe be my only exterior styling complaint.
Yeah, they're very obvious, the fender flares.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to see something that was a little bit better integrated, a little bit more body matched.
Because to me, whenever I saw a first gen Bronco that had fender flares on it, I was like, you ruined it.
Yeah.
It was just like they put like bushwhacker fender flares on it. And I'm like, it was like wrong. It was like a defining design characteristic of that vehicle. And you've ruined it.
Ruined.
It's a great car. There's some things that I would have done differently, but like, I'm weird as hell.
You know what I did like is the position of all the switches right on top of the dash. Immediate.
Boom, 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 boom.
Immediate.
And the little upfitter switches.
Yep. Right on top.
You know what I kept doing is I kept going like, you could like kind of like I imagine like
I feel like you're in Top Gun and you're like,
I imagine like Instagrammers are going to have like 87,000 LED lights and somebody's going to go, and then like, they're going to blind this elderly lady that's maybe doing like 3 mile an hour too slow for their taste.
Yeah.
And then they can go and they can turn them all off. I mean, I have buttons that I actually have to press in my Gladiator, and that just sucks now.
Yeah. You can't.
If you get into one of these things or you've driven a Ford, you know what I'm talking about. Is you can like, it's very satisfying. It's like all these successive buttons that you just go.
And I love the fact
we've spent a minute on that.
I know we did. And I love the fact that locker immediately, obvious. Sway bar disconnect, immediately obvious. You go into some of these GOAT modes with a rotary dial and it puts the vehicle in all the right configurations, which I think is great for new drivers. So if you go into rocks, it reminds you to go into neutral so that it can shift into low range. Yeah. It disconnects the sway bar. It locks the rear differential automatically. So these are really thoughtful features. I like the fact that you can lock the rear diff in two-wheel drive. Very fun.
Yep. Somebody actually was thinking there. Like totally listened to feedback on that.
Yeah. If you want your own version or the Scotty version of Baja mode, it is too high. Vehicle stability control off, which requires a long hold. Lock the rear diff. Very fun.
I didn't go that deep. I just bombed it down some dirt roads where it was fantastic. See, I really like the 4A, the all-wheel drive mode. I think that is something that Jeep is starting to bring into certain models. You can get that on the Mojave. You can get that on the Sahara. For whatever reason, you can't get that on the Rubicon. As somebody that grew up in Chicago with snow and stuff, 4-wheel drive's not always great.
Right.
2-wheel drive's always bad. So you're kind of like, do I want to like hop through the one dry intersection?
Right.
Where that all-wheel drive, especially modern all-wheel drive, with all of those sensors, that's fantastic. I mean, it's hard for me from a empirical perspective to not call this vehicle class leading in a lot of ways. I think that I'm still probably a Wrangler guy. Not probably. I'm still a Wrangler guy. I think the interiors are nicer. I think they've got a little bit more character to them, but I think this is going to be a better performer for how most people are going to use the vehicle.
Well, let's do that. Let's compare, because I don't have much else on my list here other than the fact that the payload it's just something that we do harp on in this show.
Yeah.
But you have 1,000 pounds.
But that's 1,000 pounds with rock sliders, with 35-inch tires, with a front bumper, with a rear bumper. That's always been my argument for Gladiator and Wrangler Rubicon when you see those figures.
So you probably do have enough for winch, recovery gear, tools,
87
stairs.
light bars. They've got these like cool mounts on it, like on the A-pillar mounts, which is probably one of the worst places you could mount lights. You know, you can do that, and you can put them on the roof so you can blind yourself.
And it doesn't actually need much for lights because
it has great lights
and side mirrors. It has rock lights built into it, and there's a couple switches right on the dash.
Somebody put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah, totally.
It's just, maybe that's why the accountants had to get involved. Oh, you want to have that little LED light mount? Okay, I'm going to trade you for the Fiesta center console.
That's probably.
I also thought that the orientation of the buttons was backwards.
That's because you're a Land Rover guy. That's the problem.
Like on the I'm talking about on the windows.
I do.
I kept rolling down the rear windows.
I do, because Discovery 2s and the Trek that you drove is opposite from the Bronco.
So this is the long-term effects of the Land Rover disease.
It is. Whereas the buttons are the same on a D1. I have no idea why Land Rover switched them from Discovery 1 to Discovery 2, swapped them.
Oh yeah, they did switch them.
So the Bronco is the same as the D1. So it felt very normal to me, but it felt totally wrong to you because you drove a D2 for so long.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. But I actually like the fact that they're
Ladies
right
and
there.
Gentlemen, I drove a Land Rover and now it burns when I pee. No, it doesn't.
No, it sticks with you.
It sticks with you. There's certain things that stick with you. Like, this is the Land Rover way and it's really great. Lovely folks.
So let's compare against the Wrangler. I think that's worthwhile.
I want to compare against the 4Runner.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think there's an argument. I think there's an argument for both Bronco and Wrangler, and we should get into that. But what I can't find an argument for right now is why I would recommend somebody to buy a 4Runner over this.
Well, the 4Runner, in my mind, it's a lot more quiet. It's a lot more comfortable and drivable in my mind. So
I'd like to revisit the Bronco when they fix the top. Yeah. There's no reason that they can't fix it. Frankly, like the reason I didn't drive it off road as much as you did is I was getting a headache driving it. Like you've got the hearing loss.
I have hearing loss from the Air Force, so I didn't hear anything. I mean, Tina, our editor, heard it at 35 miles an hour. You heard it at 45 miles an hour.
At 65 for me, it was unbearable. But then there's the people that have that iPhone ringtone that's like, ding! Yeah, I hear it for like 2 hours.
Well, I think, Paula, our producer, is here. And
hello.
Paula, didn't you hear that as well? The whistling from the top, or did you not hear that?
But they're fixing it. They've admitted a problem, so I'm not going to harp on them terribly, but worst driveline. I mean, the 4Runner is always going to be quieter.
It's way quieter.
It's a steel roof car.
You're talking about an international Prado 150 chassis. So it's very durable. It's designed for the developing world still. It just happens to be available in the United States. It has the highest resale value. So if you're making a financial decision, the 4Runner is still super appropriate for that. Lots of aftermarket support, a very upright driving position. The fact that you can get a locking rear differential, A-track front.
It's perfect for people who love to pay more for less.
I don't know that I agree with that. And it's not because conceptually you're wrong. It's just that
why do Toyotas maintain their value so freakishly well? I had a 4Runner. There's nothing wrong with it. I had it in 2015. It was and
it's the same car as today.
It's kind of back then. And now you have, I'll hear the argument of the Prado 150 chassis and international serviceability and yada, 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 yada. But the pictures I've seen of this thing doing stuff in prototype testing of friends that have sent me, and had them on the trail with very, very accomplished Baja racers beating the crap out of them. I don't know if the durability argument, I'll hear it on the engine, because this 2.7 liter engine, Ford, for example, on their 6.7 diesel, the low or the cold side intercooler pipe that goes from the intercooler to the intake.
To the intake, correct.
Made of plastic.
Yeah.
Because because it's natural, and in anything, you're going to get some kind of oil residue that's transferring with the oil. The oil breaks down the plastic, heat cycles, and it goes boom. like this thing has a lot going on. It's got, where that was maybe a lot of 12-inch pipe or 18 inches. This is like several feet. And then there's two of them and there's
lots of plastic,
that the Bronco, lots of plastic, but it kind of makes the driveline of the Wrangler look a little minivan-y.
Yeah.
Except for the great transmission they chose.
I think the Wrangler just does its job.
Yeah.
That's the thing about a Wrangler, right?
And they've been doing it longer.
It delivers exactly on what they promised and they keep refining the car and it feels a lot more refined.
The Bronco is like Justin Bieber's first hit. You're like, oh, that's catchy, but there's a lot more potential.
Yeah.
Even if it's not your thing.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. But I think compared to the 4Runner, the 4Runner has more payload, has 500 pounds more payload, which can be a game changer. It has more towing capacity, 5,000 pounds as opposed to 3,500 pound towing capacity. So I think there are going to be reasons to buy the 4Runner. The 4Runner currently is a better financial choice. We don't know how resale is going to work out on the Bronco, probably very well.
Probably. But in the right things, but it's an American car. I will answer my own question as to why Toyotas hold their resale value so well. For example, $40,000 Toyota is $40,000 of the Toyota dealer.
Yep.
Maybe if you've bought some cars from them, they'll give you $500 off. A $40,000 Ford, if you buy it on Memorial Day, is $32,750.
Yeah.
If you buy it you get the point. They deal on these things. The business model is much different.
It is. In fact, this is a great example of that. When we go to buy a project vehicle for Overland International, for Overland Journal, we always ask the OEM if they have employee pricing.
Yeah.
We're not looking for
industry courtesy.
That's right. A courtesy price. And with Toyota, and they were very apologetic. They're like, this is our employee pricing. It was $500 off. There are domestic manufacturers. We have gotten thousands and thousands and many, many, many thousands off the vehicle. And that's the same as any other employee for that OEM. There's a lot more margin from the dealer. Whereas on the Toyota, there's just not a lot. So it's a very high quality vehicle. It has a reputation that has lasted the test of time. I think people gain a lot of confidence. I think that if you look at the complexity of the Bronco and all that plastic under the hood, and you go off and you were going to go into the middle of nowhere with your two kids and you're driving a 4Runner, you're going down to Baja, you just don't even think about it. And that's one of the things that I so appreciated about Toyota driving them around the world is even when I was in the middle of nowhere in Antarctica and I was days from help, I was literally at what they call these points of inaccessibility. Yeah. You cannot get help. They can maybe drop some things out of an airplane to you. That I was so glad I was driving a Hilux. And I think that is what, at the end of the day, when we talk about our audience, why they buy Toyotas is because of the confidence that the vehicle gives you. And that's worth a lot of money. And maybe it's worth a lot of compromises. I mean, we may dig on the Tacoma a little bit for justifiable reasons, but I think that people at the end of the day,
want it to be better.
We want it to be better, right? But people at the end of the day, they're willing to compromise a lot to feel safe.
Yeah.
And we do that in all kinds of areas of our life. And I think that if you want a vehicle that's going to be better performing, buy a Bronco over a 4Runner. It performs much better.
Yeah.
And it looks, I actually really like the way that a 4Runner looks, but I would say that the Bronco is much more charming.
Very squinty and angry though.
Yeah, they can.
As long as they don't take the Lexus design.
Yeah, that's
design language. It's just like,
but they're doing that. They're doing that by the time this comes out, the new Tundra will be out for people to look at. It's very angry grill. They're doing that in the Toyotas as well. So then let's compare it against the Wrangler.
Yeah.
So I would say, because I did drive the Bronco in very technical terrain, limits of capability terrain. So think rock crawling waterfalls, huge holes where we were hitting rock sliders, hitting bumpers at the limits of the available ground clearance and traction. The tires are just so surprisingly good. So I think that's a real advantage.
Those good years. I mean,
you have them on your TRX, right?
Yeah. I've hit 0.8 lateral G's with them. Like they boogie.
Yeah, they do. They're great at high speed and they're actually really good in the rocks. Yeah. Where they'll struggle a little bit is going to be in the mud. They're excellent tires. The fact that the sway bar disconnect works the way that it does and it manages the head toss, I think is an advantage over the Wrangler, but the Wrangler has more overall articulation.
Yeah.
Out of the box, if you were to try to put a Recon Wrangler against a Bronco, there's going to be the advantage going to the Bronco at speed obviously. And then there's going to be a very small advantage to the Wrangler at low speed. And that's because of a little bit more articulation. The body's tucked in a little bit further and the wheels are a little further out. The approach departure angle.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to pontificate here, but I don't think most people will or have the skill to take advantage of the additional capability that a Wrangler offers, where with the Bronco, you can realize more advantages in day-to-day use.
No question. And it's easier to drive on the trail. It's actually more effective at performing well on the trail. The switch position is really good. The modes are very intuitive. The vehicle is very confidence inspiring. On our test track, we have about a 26-degree side slope that we can put vehicles on. When you're in a Wrangler with the sway bar disconnected, it feels frightening. Like it feels very unstable. Whereas with this Bronco, I was giggling because it was so effortless. Our test track is designed to push the limits of stock vehicles. There has only been one vehicle that it was effortless before this, and that was the Wrangler. And the Bronco was just as effortless in that terrain. So we had to go find other obstacles to test it against. I think at the end of the day, the Wrangler is actually a more refined product.
100%.
And
it's the Filson bag to the REI bag. The Bronco.
Or the Arc'teryx bag. I think
it's got more zippers and it's got this and it's got this and this technical material and whatever, but I want the Filson bag.
Yeah, the Wrangler is no less of a product against the Bronco. It's really important to disclose that, because especially if you're wanting to get to ultimate capability, you can modify a Wrangler much more than you can modify the Bronco. If you like driving faster on dirt roads and you love Baja, Bronco, take the Bronco. And if you're looking for something that's like retro styled, the Bronco's also great in that regard as well. And the motor's really, really nice, which is not to take something off against the new Wrangler.
I don't think that the 3.6 is a spectacular motor at all. I think that
I think it's totally adequate.
And that's about it. Like it's kind of.
But what was their answer to that? 392. So you can now get a V8 Wrangler. So I think Jeep is going to protect this market as much as they can. And they are being very aggressive about it.
Well, and then I think the interesting thing is that, Bronco did really well with bringing external experts as consultants in to advise them, on this new product.
Yeah.
Jeep has those in-house.
They do. Although I would say as a cautionary tale is that I think Jeep has started to alienate those kinds of people by becoming a little bit too closed off. And at the end of the day, you need to have fresh ideas. And I think that the Bronco team has done a good job of bringing.
Bronco's writing the checks to everybody. Bronco's writing the checks to the trophy truck, Monster Energy folks and all those guys. So, they're gonna get that.
And if Jeep isn't careful, if you become too closed off and you become too Mopar focused in your aftermarket and you don't support the aftermarket, I think Jeep needs to be careful about making sure that they give access to CAD drawings early and that they bring in the aftermarket to continue to maintain.
That's a really good point.
These Ford folks aren't stupid. So they realize that because Wrangler is becoming more insulary and they're so focused on Mopar. Yeah,
that's a really good way to say that. That's something I hadn't considered before.
I believe that Jeep runs the risk, if they don't keep themselves open to the aftermarket and communicate well with people in the industry, that they're going to miss opportunities that someone like Ford is going to be happy to scoop up.
You can see you can get rigid lights on a Bronco.
Yeah.
And then Jeep will sell you their more expensive, whatever weird things that don't even look good.
I have not seen good things come out of Mopar for the most part.
Yeah.
It's not that they make terrible things. I think they're adequate items, but we're seeing.
They're very used car salesmen,
very much so.
What's the act, Moss Magnuson, or it's the act that says the earnest design the manufacturer to prove that this aftermarket accessory really did affect it.
Right.
And I remember at the launch of the JL, the Mopar guy was there. He's like, oh, well, these are only accessories that won't void your warranty. If you put another lift kit, it'll void your warranty. And I'm like, really? You're saying that right now? Right. You're being protectionist and you're being very,
that sums it up. Mopar is being protectionist against the aftermarket. That is a bad move.
Yeah.
There are very bright people in the aftermarket that are making very good components for Jeeps, and they're getting a little bit exhausted by the obstacles that are being placed in their way to making great parts. So Jeep has always had an advantage in the space because they're aftermarket.
Well, it's the number one vehicle for, according to SEMA, for aftermarket spend.
Yep. And you don't want that to change. It's part of the reason why Jeeps are so popular is because you can personalize them to your heart's desire. And if you look at what Bronco's doing, they're inviting the aftermarket in. They're saying, I know Jeep is not supporting you. I know that Jeep is trying to sell Chinese knockoff goods through Mopar. Bring your high quality components to us and put them on our vehicle. Come on, ARB. Let's work together.
Yeah.
We're going to give you a vehicle to design and develop against ahead of the aftermarket got test vehicles before the media did.
Yeah.
So that says a lot about their intentions. So I think at the end of the day, this kind of competitive pressure is so good for us as consumers.
I think so too. I mean, it'll be interesting to see also how Toyota responds. They've kind of got to be watching this and looking, they have a loyal following, but.
So I have two questions for you. The first question is, what model of the 8 billion models of Bronco would you buy? And then the second question is, would you actually buy it?
I'd get the Sasquatch, but I wouldn't buy one. All of the touch points on that vehicle are just too cheap for me. Yeah. Like frankly, when I get something, like I like to get the leather in the car. I like to get things, I like the tech, and I don't trust, like I think I was telling you that, like I had the lane keeping assist on, and I was going through a four-way intersection, and I almost got in an accident because the car just went and almost took me in another thing, quick hands, and got it out. I don't like the Bronco. Like, I don't know what it is. Like I'm trying to be, empirical in my analysis of it, but
that's different from how you feel. And
but how I personally feel, I feel like, it's got some great off-road chops. I can't get past the accountant cash grab interior and exterior. Like it does not feel like a crafted product. I'm not saying that the Wrangler's necessarily like well crafted either, but they've been doing it for a little bit longer. I would not buy one.
And to your defense, you recently had a Raptor. I mean, you loved that car.
Loved the Raptor. If they would have put the same spend into the interior that they do for like all of the F-150s. I mean, the interior's frankly not that great on the Raptor either. I mean, they'll put a little red stripe on the steering wheel, but other than that, it's the same vents, it's the same dash, it's the same everything. I do like the landscape screen that they're doing in the Bronco, but I would get into it and I would just be like, I bought into hype and an accountant is taking advantage of me.
Oh, gotcha.
That's just what I wouldn't be able to get by. That our test vehicle is $58,000, and I know that that's competitive with a Rubicon and stuff like that, but it's not there yet for me to be honest. But it's hard to get into a vehicle that you don't want to drive because it gives you a headache.
Yeah, they've got to fix that top.
Yeah, like it's bad. Like I took it through a car wash after I took it off road, and I'm like, is it going to leak on me?
Yeah, it didn't leak through the car wash, which I was happy with that. But people who did not talk to each other that use the vehicle within our team, they all mentioned the whistling top. Yeah. It's only because I'm half deaf that I didn't really notice it.
But if somebody like lined me up and said, you have to take a 4Runner or this, I would take this.
Yeah. Well, the 4Runner's 8 billion years old, right? So
it's just not competitive.
Right.
I would be interested in the, Warthog or whatever they're going to call the Raptor version of it if they put some bucks in the interior. Because it's like a diminishing return for me. It's like at $58,000, I don't care about the performance of whatever. I would like seats that don't feel like a hospital incontinence pad. What about you?
I think that sums it up nicely. Your thoughts?
Yeah.
I would get probably similar packaging to what the test vehicle was. Yeah. I would probably get a different color, and I would definitely get the manual transmission because that would just be so joyful. I appreciated the vehicle so much for what it was, but I could not find myself at the end of it saying this is something that I would buy.
Yeah.
And I think that it is because I can get a Gladiator with a diesel.
Do you remember when
or a ZR2
when
with a
Microsoft came out with their iPod competitor and it had like all these crazy whatever features, but you wanted an iPod?
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think that the best product for overlanding that Ford makes today is the Tremor. The thing is the unloaded ride quality.
For basically the same price, you can get a Tremor.
Yeah.
So there's the argument of value, is that you can get that, that their big V8, the Godzilla 7.3 in a Tremor, because at 58, you're not getting leather or cloth seats or whatever. You're at an XLT package anyways. They're going to be nearly the same price. You're getting a much better interior for overlanding. I think that's a better choice. So yeah, that's just my overall feeling. Is like you're offering less when you're offering more at similar price points because you can,
right? And maybe that's the case, or maybe it is. Maybe
it isn't.
Maybe it's just price pressures to make the vehicle perform so well and have such a great drivetrain. Maybe they have to make compromises. That's probably what they would tell.
But I'm not a Mustang guy either.
Yeah, exactly. But it is so fun to see that it's here. It is literally it's one of the most charming vehicles I've driven in a very long time.
People love it.
I just found that I could not make the connection to it to me personally.
It didn't have much character.
Well, I thought it had tons of character, but it didn't have much connection to me.
Yeah, like the motor just sounded kind of like, not that the 3.6 Pentastar is anything.
No, it sounds terrible too.
But I'm just going to stop there.
That 2.7, it rips. It's fun.
It boogies.
It's totally fun.
So
on the Bronco, it drives great. Drivetrain's great. There are a lot of compromises around fit, finish, and material quality. If you're interested in the very best Ford Overland vehicle right now, go check out the Tremor. That's my opinion.
100%. Or a Raptor, because they are phenomenal.
I've never been.
I miss my Raptor. I mean, even with the TRX, I'm like,
how is that possible with the TRX?
Well, the TRX is a better road car. The Raptor is better if you're going to modify it to go off road.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. We'll have to have a conversation about that later.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next time.